Theories of speech perception. This is really interesting for me. This goes back a long way. You don't have to write this part down, but my master's on hand clapping, what we wanted to actually show, my mentor wanted to show, is that this idea that speech processing is special, that's what we've been saying here. He wanted to show that actually the way people process non-speech signals follows actually a lot of the same rules. So that's why my study for 3 years of my life was on hand clapping. But that's not really important to you here and now. Are we actually doing cognitive neuroscience here? Are we actually talking cognitive neuroscience? Are we talking cognitive? Are we talking neuroscience? Are we talking both? What would you guys say here? So far, what have we been talking about? What realm? It actually has not been cognitive neuroscience yet. What realm have we been talking about here? Anyone? Lily, what would you say?
I mean, I guess I would say yes because we haven't really gotten into it yet, but there are parts of the brain that process speech and language in a certain way, and so how we're perceiving that and then how we're processing that in our brain.
We haven't gotten into that neuroscience aspect yet, but we've really been talking about kind of the cognitive realm, and actually this idea of, we've been talking a lot about the field, and I'll write it down, it's called psychophysics. Psychophysics. Psycho, P-S-Y-C-H-O, physics. We've been talking about how the physical world is related to the perceptual, and there's this lack of invariance. Now we're going to start talking a little more, so it's really been cognitive and kind of psychophysics here about speech, the physical world of speech. What are the three dimensions of any sound?
Time, frequency, and amplitude.
Time, frequency, and amplitude, and they correlate with what perceptual dimensions? Pitch and volume. And we know there's really a lack of invariance there due to all these things we're saying. The first theory that really came out, and I remember when I was in my lab in the 80s studying this, and I haven't gotten to talk about it since then, was what was called the motor theory of speech perception. The motor theory of speech perception, you can read it there, is the hypothesis that people perceiving spoken words, right? That's what you're doing right now. Is there a lot of invariance there? Yeah, things are changing all the time, aren't they? What Lieberman and Mattingly basically said is that the reason you can perceive speech is because you know the invariance is how the vocal tract is working. That when you're listening to me talk, you can actually figure out what's going on in my vocal tract. This is called the motor theory of speech perception. That you're perceiving the spoken words by identifying the vocal tract gestures with which they were pronounced. So if you're listening to me, they're saying you're actually able to perceive my vocal tract. You're picking up on that, and that lets you understand speech. What do you guys think about that idea? Does that make sense? Do you like it? Do you not like it? So it's kind of a perception-production link, and it's saying the invariance here is the vocal tract. Any thoughts about this? Hannah, any thoughts about this? Do you like this? Do you not like this? Opinions are free.
I think I like it because, English is spoken in so many places, and so there are so many different accents, and so you can use your knowledge of this and then hearing how people speak to relate if you can't understand them through the accent to what they could be saying to understand them.
So it could work because there's so many different dialects that people speak, but the idea, so you could say that what are they saying can explain it though. They're saying that as you're listening to me, to understand me, what are you able to perceive?
Your vocal tract, so how you're speaking.
How my vocal tract is. So there is some evidence about this idea. Is there anybody on the negative side of this, though? So you could take that side of it, and this was developed in the late 60s. They came up with this. So we'll say the late 60s. I think it was about 1967. Yeah.
So what do they mean by vocal tract gestures? Do they mean like the way you form the words? Or
Yeah, just the way your vocal tract is, hello, that you're able to perceive. It was close with a yawn there, but that was, I got to say hello instead of a yawn. No, it's okay. So the idea was that you can perceive my sounds because when I'm saying hello, you're able to perceive my vocal tract and what it's doing to form that, and thus you're able to perceive it. So it's one theory out there, but it really hasn't stood the test of time too well. This idea that you can just perceive the vocal tract gestures just really hasn't made it. There's this lack of invariance, things are difficult to perceive. More Chomsky's idea that there must be something really specialized going on here that allows us to do it. That you have some specialized processor that lets you segment automatically. You can segment things automatically when you hear them, and even though I'm co-articulating, what are you able to do? What are you able to do? Am I co-articulating as I'm talking to you now? Am I co-articulating? Yeah. Are you able to understand that? Yeah, so maybe more a language acquisition device, that there's something just special about speech. Question, Madison? So there's something special about speech that allows us to do this. Are we really good at doing this? Yeah, we actually are. We're actually really good at doing this type of thing. So that was one idea. The motor theory was one idea. The other thing I wanted to go into is I wanted to talk a little more, and this was on the test, about Broca and Wernicke, 473 and 478. And there was a question on the test. Let's see if I've got the right pages. Actually, it's 473 and 474. What did Broca and Wernicke have to say about speech? Broca, what was Broca's idea? Actually, we can keep recording on this. What was Broca's idea? There was a test question on this. What was Broca's idea? If you can't produce speech, what did he have to say?
You can't say anything.
If you can't say anything, it was due to what particular reason?
There was damage to the Broca's area.
Broca's area. So there was damage in the frontal lobe. And if you actually look on page 73, it kind of shows Broca's area. It's actually in the frontal lobe. It's called the motor cortex. You can't speak, that's a problem with Broca's area. What did Wernicke have to say?
You can't perceive whether it's a problem with
Wernicke's area, another area of the brain, is processing speech. So if you're not able to understand what I'm saying, that there's something wrong with Wernicke's area. Would you call these ideas cognitive neuroscience? Why would you call these cognitive neuroscience?
because they're neurological.
It's basically, here's what's going on cognitively, here's why you can't do it. So we're actually looking at dysfunction, and we're tracing it to the biological roots. So Wernicke and Broca came up with these ideas, and if you actually turn to the other pages here, they talked about, if you turn to 474 as well, they basically came up with the idea that we have things coming in, Lichtenstein's model, so 11.4, with the idea of things are coming in, maybe we can't encode them, that's Wernicke's aphasia, and then things go on to Broca's area, you maybe can't produce them, and that's kind of the neurobiological basis. But when were Wernicke and Broca around doing this? It was a long time ago. And actually, they come up with this third type of, this is called aphasia. If you can't understand what somebody is saying, it's called aphasia. So Wernicke's aphasia is you can't understand what somebody is saying. Broca's, you can't produce it. They actually said if there's a cut in the pathway between them, you might be able to understand what somebody is saying. You might be able to produce some sounds, but what couldn't you do? Hannah, what did I just say? Hannah, what did I just say?
What did I just say?
So you're repeating what I just said there. If you had a cut between Broca's and Wernicke's area, guess what you wouldn't be able to do?
Repeat or comprehend what you're saying?
Well, you wouldn't be able to repeat. You would understand what I'm saying, and you'd be able to say it, but you'd have what they call here, what do they call it? Conduction aphasia. So they actually talk about conduction aphasia. So that's kind of one of the other models of aphasia. Geschwind kind of came up with this idea as well. And they went into the neurobiological roots. If you turn back to 473, you can see they have the brain area structured. So maybe if there's a disconnect between Broca's and Wernicke's in the angular gyrus, do you see the angular gyrus there? Maybe you would not be able to repeat what somebody is saying, because to repeat, you have to perceive and then you have to produce that sound. Conduction aphasia. So this is kind of another theory of cognitive neuroscience, if you will. Let's look at some of these other things here. I was talking a little bit about 478. Was there anything on there? No. Never mind on the 478. Sorry about that. Okay, what I'd like to do next, so we kind of got cognitive neuroscience there for a little bit of time. What I'd like to do next is I'd like to have you read it. I'm going to turn the acoustic recording off. Let's break it down into actual groups here, I think. We've got some abstracts here. We went through the lack of invariance. Do we have a couple of people we can... Actually, I want you to read the first abstract, and then I'd like to talk about what it means. So if you're at home listening to this, read abstracts 1, 2, and 3. And actually, why don't we actually all do that even here? Read abstract number 1, try to figure out what it means, talk to your neighbor about it. Read abstract number 2, try to figure out what it means and the meaning of it, and then read abstract 3, and then we'll have a class discussion about it.